There are more and more signs that Israel and Hamas are inching closer to a deal that would put in place a long-term ceasefire. A senior Hamas official told the London-based Sharq al-Awsat newspaper that the group's leadership has been promoting a, quote, gradual agreement that would begin first with a halt to arson attacks and other violence along the Gaza border in exchange for eased border restrictions. Later on, according to the report, the deal would include talks for a prisoner exchange agreement and the implementation of long-proposed humanitarian projects in Gaza. So first of all, I just want to say that this is the only report that we've seen about, a second phase that might include prisoner exchange talks. I haven't seen it confirmed anywhere else. Should a deal be signed without the immediate return of the bodies of the two soldiers who were killed in the 2014 war and those other two citizens that are still being held captive? Should it be signed, without getting these people back? Simcha?
I think that no deal should be signed at all. I think there is no point in signing the deal. The Hamas reason of existence is destroying Israel. You sign an agreement with them, they break it. We had agreements with, and that's the first reason. The second reason is, as we always say, people who don't have peace cannot give peace to other people. The Palestinians are not in peace with each other. Hamas and the Palestinian Authority are all the time in conflict. And every agreement that you will have with Hamas, then they will send the bombs through some other organization.
So what should the people? What do you tell the people living around the Gaza Strip that they should just?
I don't tell them anything. I tell the army of Israel and the politicians in Israel. Yeah. You are in charge of our safety, and do whatever it takes.
All right.
And that's exactly what the army is saying that we need to do. To ease the humanitarian suffering within
the army has been saying that for years.
The army needs to fight, not to negotiate. So that's not the army role.
But the army has been recommending easing humanitarian crisis in Gaza.
The army was asked, what can we do against the situation and to stop the suffering of the Israelis who live on the Gaza border? The answer was, we have to give relief to the people of Gaza.
Right.
You know something? As a human being, as a Jew, we have to help the humanitarian suffering of the people in Gaza.
Let me ask you this, Tammi. Humanitarian for humanitarian, isn't it returning the bodies also humanitarian aspect?
There is no equality here. We are a sovereign country. We're talking about a terror group in charge of almost 2 million people, keeping them prisoners there in Gaza. And I know there were elections there. Everything is true, and still there is no equality. Israel and Hamas, we're not at the same level.
Not the same level, Lital.
We're not on the same level, but if you want to see the situation in the Gaza Strip continue, the way Hamas is behaving towards its own people, then giving them all those prizes is just telling them, okay, you can just continue the way you are with your own people. And I don't think we need to give them those prizes. We need to bring our sons back to Israel before we're easing any kind of conditions. And I couldn't agree.
So you would be against signing this deal, for example?
I would be against, and I couldn't agree. I couldn't agree more with Simcha when he's saying that that at the end of the day, you're signing an agreement, you don't know who's sitting on the other side and whether they're going to
respect. So why is the Prime Minister?
It's not a peace treaty. In any case, it's not a peace treaty. Okay, there are a few things on the table that we need to address. One, there are the 2 dead soldiers, and 2 very poor and weak citizens, Israeli citizens, that sometimes we forget who they are, and they are captive there. The second thing is the humanitarian suffering within the Gaza borders, still people living there. And then we have the suffering of the Israelis who live on the Gaza border, who are suffering daily. And these are the things we're trying to address now. It's not a peace treaty.
The USA and Israel used to have a very strong moral principle. You don't negotiate with terrorists.
Right.
You don't negotiate. We did it. But it was a mistake. It's not a good idea.
Your Prime Minister is now negotiating with terrorists, isn't he?
All the time.
So that's my criticism.
Why do you think he is now?
That's my criticism.
What changed? Why is he now? Why is he suddenly listening to the IDF, I think, who has been recommending...
I don't know if it's the IDF, it's not the IDF.
Because I think that at the moment, the Israeli government don't want to go into an operation in the Gaza Strip. We have enough problems in the northern border with Syria, and we don't want to go into a fight, into a war with Hamas.
This is the only way out.
So at the moment, this is the only way out. This is the only way out. But what I'm saying is,
so that's the only way out, and you're against it. I don't get it. What do you want? Do you want a war? Do you want to see more dead people?
I don't want a war, but I'm saying signing an agreement, it's at the end of the day will cause more casualties because it's only a matter of time until Hamas will start shooting again.
Or going into the Strip.
It's not.
You're showing me two options: either going to the Strip and
I don't think it's a matter of black and white. It's either going into a war or signing a peace agreement.
So what's the third option?
I think you need to be stricter with Hamas.
The army is the problem, as you said. The army.
Now the IDF is the problem.
The army is the problem.
Well, maybe
the army. It was published that the army chief of staff said he wouldn't shoot and people that launching fire attacks on Israel.
Yes.
If the army.
They were talking about children.
If the army, I don't care if they are children. If the army is not willing to defend Israel border, and instead he's offering peace treaty, he's not doing his job as an army, and the politicians, their position should be do your job, defend the border, and let us deal with politicians and other politicians from other countries.
So we were talking about the families who are still waiting for the remains of their sons that were killed in the 2014 war, and Channel 10, Israeli Channel 10, came out with I don't know if it's called a scoop or something, but the wife of the Prime Minister, Sarah Netanyahu, apparently told the mother of one of the soldiers whose body is being held by this Hamas terror group in Gaza that she and her husband were, as you can see on the screen, ingrates. She also said in a telephone conversation to Leah Golding, the mother of one of the soldiers, that your ties to my husband's rivals could hurt the efforts the Prime Minister invests in the issue. And this is, of course, because at a ceremony that Leah Golding, the mother, held about 2 years ago, she invited the Justice Minister, Ayal Shaked, from a different party, of the same government, but of a different party, who is considered, somewhat of a rival to the Prime Minister.
And popular in polls. That's what you mean as a rival.
Okay. So what do you make of this, Tammi?
I think it's outrageous.
Why?
I think it's outrageous. I think it's... Who says that? Who says such a thing to a bereaved mother who is coming to plea for the remains of her child? Who says that? Who brings in small, petty politics into such a situation? What kind of a person does that? And what Sarah Netanyahu, we have to say, Sarah Netanyahu was not elected by anyone, so she's not a problem. But she sits in a room with her husband. Her husband is the Prime Minister of Israel. He's my Prime Minister, whether I elected him or not. Still my Prime Minister. It's unacceptable, and I expect him, instead of saying, leave my wife out of it, everything, to say, this is not true, or this will never be said from my side. And no matter what no matter what party you vote for, a soldier is a soldier, a life is a life, an Israeli is an Israeli. But this Prime Minister works exactly the opposite. We just heard even the IDF is apparently
I'm not the Prime Minister yet. I'm not the Prime Minister yet. You don't have to point at me and say the Prime Minister. I criticize the Prime Minister.
Well, you criticize that. It sounds like something from an episode of The Sopranos.
I think
mobster talk.
I think that the biggest mistake that we can do as people is to take this subject and make it political. And if the claims that Sarah did it was wrong, but what we do now, if we speak more about this item, we do exactly the same. It's wrong, and I think it's a problem.
Every time we talk about Sarah Netanyahu,
I think it's a problem
many issues that
to take Goldin's family and Shaul's family, which are dear to us all, and make it into a political tool to attack Netanyahu or Netanyahu's wife or whatever. I think it's not respecting them. It's not respecting the issue, and I think it's a mistake.
It's the wife of the Prime Minister who turned the whole thing into a political issue.
I think it's
it's the Prime Minister
we have to
himself.
go for